This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. I see. I'll definitely bring Master's words to Huayuan. Mo Xiaochuan's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. It was difficult for a normal clone to exist for too long without the main body. He did not know what kind of secret technique the other party was using, but he had always respected alchemists, not to mention Mo Huayuan's master, who was naturally very powerful. Just tell him that this is my intention, Yuan Gaohan said. As for my current situation, there's no need to tell him. He gave Yunxiao a resentful look, then disappeared from where he was and went back to refining. He was gradually getting used to the carefree life of refining weapons in the Divine Realm tablet, and he was getting better at controlling the divine fire. He didn't want to leave anymore. Master, you've detained Master Yuan's clone. Does he know about this? Mo Xiaochuan asked. Yunxiao laughed. Of course I don't know. If he knew, he would have come to fight me to the death. If we let Huayuan go back and meet Master Yuan in person, won't it arouse suspicion? Mo Xiaochuan asked worriedly. It doesn't matter, Yunxiao said. If he comes in person, I'll just catch him and bring him in as well. It's a good opportunity for me to merge the two of them into one, greatly increasing his strength and making him more useful to me. Now that you've said that, I'm looking forward to it. The heavenly sword picture he needed was too costly, and it was difficult for Yuan Gaohan to refine all of them with his 8th tier body. If he had a 9th tier great alchemist, the situation would be completely different. Mo Xiaochuan was taken aback when he saw Yunxiao's bright eyes. He did not dare to imagine the consequences. If a 9th tier alchemist were to go missing in the Holy Region, it would definitely be a major event that would shake the world. Master, I'll go and bid farewell to Huayuan, Mo Xiaochuan said hurriedly. Since he's going back to the sacred zone, Yunxiao said, I'm afraid he'll have to go to Yufeng City with us. You brothers can travel together, but don't reveal my identity. In front of outsiders, you can just call me Young Master Yun. Young Master Yun Shi. Alright, Young Master Yun. Mo Xiaochuan had a strange look on his face, but he was still very happy. His master was not dead, Huayuan could return to the Holy Region, and he had been freed from the evil spirit. He felt as if he was on a sunny day. After a few laughs, he was sent out of the Divine Realm tablet by Yunxiao and flew toward Mo Huayuan. After sending Mo Xiaochuan off, Yunxiao began to concentrate on cultivating. What he lacked the most right now was cultivation. The vital qi required for his special constitution was too astonishing. He took out the Southern Fire golden crystal essence that he had obtained. They were like primordial cores, and the vital qi directly seeped into his skin. It was refreshing and indescribably comfortable. These Southern Fire golden crystal essences should be enough for me to cross the 7 constellations realm. I wonder how long it will take. After making up his mind, Yunxiao began to cultivate and absorb the primordial qi. His whole body was immediately wrapped in a red chaos, and the primordial qi was so dense that it almost solidified. In order to resist the damage caused by the fire elemental power, his skin began to turn inch by inch into a faint golden color, displaying the initial state of the imperishable golden body. Now, Yunxiao was sure that there must be another cultivation technique, because he had cultivated the tyrant body tempering technique to the extreme, and there was no more follow-up technique. However, his current state was far from Ao Chongkong's. It was like the difference between cloud and mud. It could still be used to deal with some experts below the martial supreme realm. However, it was nothing to a martial sovereign of the 9th heaven. After he calmed his mind, he began to absorb the primordial stones crazily. The night passed in the blink of an eye, and the next day. Hanchuan's voice came from outside the secret room, everything is ready. Has young Master Yun come out of seclusion? Yunxiao snapped out of his meditative state and sent the surging primordial qi in his body back into his dantian as he said softly, he's at the peak of 8-star, so it's only natural for him to rush to the martial emperor realm of the 7 constellations realm before the double competition. Yunxiao tidied up his clothes and then opened the door of the secret room. Everyone had been waiting outside for a long time, and a group of beautiful maidservants stood on both sides of him. When they saw him coming out, they all greeted him with great respect. On the left, Han Xian was dressed in purple, her hair tied up in a dainty bun, and a fragrant pouch hung on her waist. Her entire person was like a fragrant herb beauty, radiant like spring. Wu Qian was also dressed exquisitely, with a string of beads hanging around his neck. He looked like a lady in a palace dress as he stood behind Han Xian with a happy expression. On his right were the Mo brothers, Mo Xiaochuan and Mo Huayuan, who were also smiling at him. Mo Huayuan's eyes were filled with gratitude. Little Xuanzi was also behind Mo Huayuan, his face full of smiles, but there was a little fear in his smile. When Yunxiao saw this scene, he said in surprise, he smiled bitterly. I'm just going to Yufeng City. There's no need to make it so grand, like an emperor's ascension to the throne. Mo Xiaochuan smiled. Young Master Yun, our trip to Yufeng City is more important than the ascension of the throne. It's not too much for guild leader Han Xian to send you off. You're right. Han Xian chuckled and said, young Master Yun is very famous among the many forces in South Fire City. Even Lord Xiaochuan and Lord Huayuan, one is a martial emperor of the 9 heavens, and the other is an 8th-tier great alchemist. The two of them alone are enough to shake the entire South Fire City. Mo Huayuan stepped forward and bowed. Thank you, young Master Yun, for saving my big brother. I'm eternally grateful and I'll never forget this great favor. You're welcome, Yunxiao said with a smile. Xiaochuan and I are old friends. It's only natural that I save him. Mo Huayuan and Han Xian were both confused. Judging from Yunxiao's age and Mo Xiaochuan's traces in the past 10 years, they could not be old acquaintances. However, since he had put it that way and Mo Xiaochuan was smiling without saying a word, as if he had silently agreed to it, the two of them did not ask despite their doubts. It's getting late, let's go, Han Xian said. Yunxiao nodded and took the lead, heading toward the Thunderwind Chamber of Commerce. Gao Lin had been informed by Han Xian long ago, so he was also waiting at the door with his men. When he saw Yunxiao coming, he went up to him with a warm smile, but when he suddenly saw the Mo brothers, whose eyes were cold, his face changed drastically, especially the faint aura coming from Mo Xiaochuan. It was like a cold wind blowing into his heart, and although he was under the sun, he still felt his hands and feet turn cold. The smile on his face stiffened, and beads of cold sweat the size of beans rolled down his forehead. I'll have to trouble you to wait here, President Gao. Yunxiao stepped forward with a smile and greeted him politely. After all, he was going to use the teleportation array, and they were waiting here for him, so he had to thank them for their kindness. Humph, President Gao, with such a lineup, aren't you overestimating me? Mo Huayuan's eyes burned with rage, and his gaze seemed to be able to set Gao Lin on fire. If not for Mo Xiaochuan's instructions, he would have charged forward to kill them. Master Mo, Lord Xiaochuan, I had no choice. Gao Lin wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and looked at Yunxiao for help with a pitiful look. I said that I will not pursue the past, Yunxiao said with a smile. Of course, it still counts. Only then did Gao Lin feel relieved. Otherwise, either of the two brothers of the Mo family could have crushed him to death, and the families behind them were so powerful that even a behemoth like the Thunderwind Chamber of Commerce didn't dare to offend them. Gao Lin did not dare to look at the two brothers, so he looked at Yunxiao and said with a smile, young Master Yun, please come in. The teleportation formation is ready, and you can leave at any time. All right, he said. Yunxiao answered. Then, the group came to the important place of Thunderwind Chamber of Commerce, where a huge teleportation array was slowly rotating with an intimidating aura. Who can leave without my Big Dipper Sect's permission? Suddenly, a cold snort came from the sky. Several rays of light shot over from the distance and gathered above the formation, gradually revealing a few figures. One of them was shining with a golden light as he looked down at Yunxiao and said in a cold voice, you killed my elder Feng, stole my lightning transformation divine skill, and took a large amount of my treasures. You want to leave just like that? This person was the Big Dipper sect leader, Jiang Linghua, and there were a few Big Dipper sect elders behind him. Tan Dijuan wasn't among them, but Mei Dong had followed them, and she seemed to have something on her mind. Jiang Linghua stood in the air with a proud and cold expression. She snorted, Li Yunxiao, we meet again so soon. The grudge between you and my Big Dipper sect hasn't been settled yet, right? So, it's you, old Zhang, Yunxiao said. I don't like what you're saying. Killing Elder Feng was instructed by Tan Dijuan, and I obtained the lightning transformation divine skill by accident. As for the treasure, everyone was present at that time, and I don't think anyone objected to it. Everyone was dumbfounded when they heard him call him Old Zhang. Especially the people from the Chamber of Commerce, they wanted to laugh but couldn't. Nonsense. Zhang Linghua shouted coldly. Quickly hand over the lightning transformation divine technique and the treasure, and then follow me back to the Big Dipper sect to await my punishment. When his Emperor Qi of the Nine Heavens spread out, everyone felt a great pressure, which made it difficult for them to adapt. If a war broke out here, the Thunderwind Chamber of Commerce would be the most affected. However, Gao Lin wasn't worried at all. Instead, he was sneering in his heart. He couldn't wait for Zhang Linghua to be even more arrogant, because he had already noticed that Mo Xiaochuan's expression was a little off. Hand over the thunder art and the treasure, Yun Shao said in surprise. Then I'll go back with you to be punished and wait for your punishment. Are you out of your mind? Or did you cultivate for too long and your brain got damaged? Everyone was drenched in cold sweat. A martial supreme was an unattainable existence in Southfire City. Who would dare to go against the Emperor's might? But, many people had seen Yun Shao fight, and they had also seen him escape on the mountain of the Big Dipper sect that day. They were afraid that if they angered Zhang Linghua, Yun Shao would turn into a thunderbolt and flee, leaving them to suffer in the aftermath. So, they were all extremely vigilant, and if they found something wrong, they would be the first to run away. Zhang Linghua's face turned cold as well. A dragon formed from Emperor Qi gathered around her and roared, "You don't know the immensity of the heavens and earth. Today, I've brought 5 elders with me to lock down this area. Let's see how you escape with heaven evasion and earth evasion." After listening to Tan Dizong's report, he decided to teach Yun Shao a lesson. Otherwise, the kid would be even more unscrupulous in the later negotiations. On the other hand, Yun Shao had mastered the thunder transformation divine technique and form displacement, so even Zhang Linghua was not sure if he could keep him here. As such, the 5 powerful elders he had brought with him this time immediately flew in 5 different directions the moment he gave the order. After a few hand seals were cast, the space several hundred meters between the 5 of them was immediately sealed. No one could break through the air and leave, unless their strength was beyond the 5 of them combined. Li Yunxiao, I know you have an extraordinary background, but the realm of heavenly martial arts is not your backyard. Today, I'll show you how high the sky is and how thick the earth is. Emperor Qi Dragon, go. Roar. Run. Zhang Linghua shouted coldly, and the dragon-shaped emperor pressure roared in the air as if a martial sovereign was angry. It rushed down, and the entire sky changed color. Many people were so scared that their legs turned soft and they kept running away. However, the space here was sealed, so they could only escape a little further and could not leave the battlefield. Mo Xiaochuan finally made his move, a sharp killing intent flashing in his eyes. Someone had dared to attack his master. In his heart, he had already been sentenced to death, let alone to be so insolent and rude. You're the country bumpkin who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Mo Xiaochuan sneered coldly as he formed a sword seal with 2 fingers and suddenly pointed at the air. A ray of sword energy shot up from his arm. In an instant, it was as if a rainbow had risen, and the surroundings were peaceful. Zhang Linghua's Emperor Qi Dragon aura was actually forced back by the rainbow. Wherever the sword ray touched, it would dissipate without a doubt. After the dragon aura was destroyed, the sword ray was still as powerful as ever as it slashed towards Zhang Linghua. Although it looked extremely beautiful, it emitted a terrifying power that made people's hearts palpitate. If one looked closely, they would find that there were tiny spatial cracks around the sword light, which were devouring everything. Mo Xiaochuan's entire body was bathed in the rainbow. His finger had transformed into a sword, and he looked extremely carefree. On the contrary, Zhang Linghua was shocked. This person who had appeared out of nowhere was so powerful. Not only did the sword cut through his Emperor Qi with irresistible force, but it also had the power to take his life. In his shock, he hurriedly used two of his fingers to form a sword and mimicked his opponent's sword chi. At this moment, his heart was filled with shock. Only a martial emperor powerhouse would be able to go against him. On the other hand, he had just advanced to the rank of a martial emperor and had never fought with another martial emperor before. He did not know how strong the other martial emperor were, so he felt uneasy. Boom. Finger sword against finger sword, the two forces collided and shot out in the air. It was like a huge epiphyllum, beautiful but short-lived, and full of horror. It scared everyone on the spot, and they didn't dare to move, for fear of being affected. Zhang Linghua's heart trembled, and he could faintly sense that the other party's strength seemed to be above his. In a moment of desperation, he hurriedly pulled out the sword that he had been cultivating with her mind and slashed down. He shouted angrily, "One move, heaven-splitting, sword passing without a trace." Under the infusion of the martial emperor's power, the enormous power of an 8th-tier profound armament was unleashed to its maximum extent. It wasn't that the Big Dipper sect didn't have 9th-tier profound armaments, but they were limited by Zhang Linghua's past strength and couldn't refine them. Barely using it, it was not as good as his original 8th-tier profound armament. This strike contained almost all of his power, and the entire world changed color. Gao Lin's face was also filled with shock. Although he also hoped for a conflict between the two, he didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. However, it was obviously too late. Sword after sword, the power of the sword enveloped the surrounding area, and the space was sealed. No one could escape. No one knew if Zhang Linghua's sword attack was intentional or not, but it seemed to be trying to kill everyone. You're just a newbie who has just stepped into the martial supreme realm. You're still too inexperienced. Mo Xiaochuan's expression was one of mockery. His right hand gently swept in front of him, and a Tai Chi pattern suddenly formed. The yin and yang fishes swam happily in it. With a light tap of his finger, a sword gleam was immediately stirred up and condensed at the tip of his finger. It pierced through the air toward Zhang Linghua's shocking sword chi. The mortal world gazes at Ing Haoyu. The sword ray did not look as powerful as Zhang Linghua's shocking sword, but it directly split the opponent's sword power and hit the sword ray hard, making a huge sound and turning the whole world pale. The space that had been sealed by the 5 elders was instantly shattered. The 5 of them paled in shock and tried their best to block the residual power of the sword chi, but they were still knocked back several thousand meters. They all spat out blood and were injured. The 5 of them turned pale with shock and flew over from a distance in an instant. They gathered behind Zhang Linghua and looked down in shock at Mo Xiaochuan, who had a calm expression. Zhang Linghua's expression was clearly not as relaxed as Mo Xiaochuan's. Instead, it was as livid as water. Her right hand, which was holding the treasured sword, was trembling at a very small frequency, and the light on the treasured sword had completely disappeared. Zhang Linghua's hand that was holding the sword trembled slightly. Although he tried his best to control it, it could not escape the 5 elders' ties. A huge wave was set off in his heart, and each of them had a serious expression. The 2 of them made a total of 2 moves, and then stopped attacking. The entire space became eerily silent. Mo Xiaochuan was the first to break the silence. He said sarcastically, "But you think you're invincible just because you've become a martial supreme? There are as many country bumpkins like you as you want on this continent. If you want to be a king or an emperor, get lost and go back to your Big Dipper sect. In front of young Master Yun, you are not qualified to act arrogantly, do you understand?" Zhang Linghua's expression was as ugly as it could get. No one could tell what was going on in the sword fight just now, but he knew very well that he was no match for the man in front of him. Mo Xiaochuan's sarcastic words sent a chill down everyone's spine. It was as if they had a rough idea of the difference in strength between the two. As expected, Zhang Linghua retracted her arrogant aura and said in a low voice, "Who are you? What's his relationship with Li Yunxiao?" "Who I am is none of your business," Mo Xiaochuan said. "As for what you want to say to young Master Yun, get the hell out here and talk to him face to face. Otherwise, get lost. Everyone isn't used to looking at you with their heads held high like this." The faces of the disciples of the Big Dipper sect changed drastically, but they could vaguely guess this person's strength. Even the sect master became friendly. They all thought that they were finished. They were afraid that they would lose all their face this time. Everyone was equally shocked. They didn't know where such a strange person came from, and his strength was heaven-defying. Only a marshal supreme would be able to stand up to Zhang Linghua. Only Gao Lin was overjoyed. He couldn't wait for Mo Xiaochuan to fly into a rage and kill Zhang Linghua with a single palm strike. Then, the situation in the entire Southfire City would change drastically again. When Zhang Linghua saw how respectful Mo Xiaochuan was to Yun Shao, he was even more shocked, and he was even more certain that Yun Shao was a disciple of some powerful family. At the thought of this, he could no longer act arrogantly. He brought everyone down from the sky. Zhang Linghua looked at Yun Shao and said with a complicated expression, "Young Master Yun, the lightning transformation divine art is the greatest secret art of our Big Dipper sect. I hope that young Master Yun can pay for it." He suddenly realized that all his plans and predictions were useless. Instead, he was begging the other party. The crowd was floored. The image of a marshal supreme being was subverted in an instant. Even a marshal supreme would have to admit defeat in the face of circumstances. Now, not only did he want the lightning divine technique, he didn't even mention the death of Elder Feng and the treasure. Oh. So the lightning transformation divine art is so important. I wonder what price sect leader Zhang is going to pay to get it back. When Yun Shao heard that he would be paid, he immediately perked up and smiled. 10 billion primeval stones, Zhang Linghua said. He said unhurriedly. Since the other party was willing to offer a price, it was easy to handle. The number of primeval stones was just a matter of numbers, but he could not give too much either. It would be too much of a loss, and he would lose face. No. Yun Shao shook his head and said, "Sect leader Zhang, you're too insincere. Since it was a sect treasure, it couldn't be worth only 10 billion. President Qian, how about I sell my lightning transformation divine technique to you for 20 billion primeval stones?" Good, good. I'd be willing to pay 200 billion, let alone 20 billion. Said Gao Lin with a laugh. He naturally knew Yun Xiao's intention, which was nothing more than extorting more, and he was happy to see it, so he hurriedly helped him. Gao Lin, you're good, you brute. Zhang Linghua's eyes glowed with a menacing light as she stared at Gao Lin, her eyes filled with threat. Gao Lin snorted coldly. Although he did not want to offend Zhang Linghua, when weighing the two sides, he naturally had to stand on Yun Xiao's side. As the president of the Thunderwind Chamber of Commerce, Zhang Linghua would never dare to kill him. But it was different for Yun Xiao. Without his promise, he would have been killed by Mo Xiaochuan by now. Sect leader Zhang, you can't be too black-hearted. I can understand that you want to buy back the lightning transformation divine technique at a low price, but don't even think about buying seafood with cabbage money. Doing business is nothing more than wishful thinking on both sides, and the price is fair. Even I, a businessman, can't bear to see your insincere offer. Gao Lin said slowly, his voice filled with pain. Enough. Zhang Linghua cried out in anger, not knowing where to vent his anger. He stared at Yun Shao and said, I'll trade something for the lightning transformation divine art. If young Master Yun thinks it's feasible, then I'll trade. If it's not, then forget it. He took out a small square box the size of his palm and looked at it for a long time, his eyes full of heartache. In the end, he gritted his teeth and threw it away. Yun Shao was very curious about what it was that could make Zhang Linghua so sad. Mo Xiaochuan was afraid that Zhang Linghua would play tricks, so he grabbed Yun Shao first. Yun Xiao's safety was his top priority at the moment, and he could not let his master get hurt. Mo Xiaochuan took the box and opened it. After glancing at it, he handed it to Yun Shao. This action was seen by everyone and they were shocked. The existence of such a powerful martial emperor was like the young man's bodyguard. If they were Master Mo Huayuan's bodyguards, they could still understand. After all, many martial emperors were willing to work for 8th-tier alchemists. But, as for Yun Xiao's hesitation, he could not think of a second reason other than his powerful background. On the other hand, Zhang Linghua's face was as dark as water. Mo Xiaochuan's act of taking this item was undoubtedly a form of contempt for him. He clenched his fists in anger, and his knuckles cracked. However, the situation was more powerful than he was, so he had to lower his head.